On the way to the Grammys, I had gotten a record 13, I think it was 13 nominations for Thriller. And
One video release party had the two in good humor.
No dancing, no dancing.
Their frequent public appearances meant a lot of speculation at the time about a possible romance.
For decades, Michael Jackson and Brooke Shields shared a unique bond that fascinated fans and media alike, a friendship that seemed both profound and, at times, cryptic. Their connection sparked endless speculation, with the world guessing at the true nature of their relationship. Were they romantically involved, close confidants, or did their friendship mask something deeper, something more complicated? For years, Brooke remained quiet, choosing to honor their friendship privately. But now, 15 years after Michael's passing, she's come forward to share a side of him that could change everything we thought we knew. Michael and Brooke were two of the most famous people on the planet, thrust into the spotlight at young ages and forced to navigate the pressures of fame in a way that few could truly understand. They became almost inseparable during the 80s, attending high-profile events together and appearing in public as a united front. For a long time, Michael openly admired Brooke, calling her one of his closest friends and even describing her as his ideal woman. Yet Brooke's latest revelation suggests there was far more beneath the surface, something that neither of them dared to speak about publicly. It turns out the world may have only seen a fraction of who Michael Jackson really was. In a recent candid interview, Brooke has hinted at an untold side of Michael, a part of him that had been hidden from the spotlight for years. She describes a version of Michael that even the most dedicated fans may find unfamiliar, someone who struggled deeply with self-image, inner conflict, and the unrelenting pressures of fame. Brooke's insights come from years of observing Michael up close, seeing beyond the king of pop persona to the man he was when the cameras weren't rolling. She reveals that Michael sometimes appeared almost haunted by something invisible, burdened by a darkness he didn't allow anyone else to see. There were times when he'd confide in me about things that didn't match his public image at all, Brooke admitted. It made me look at him in a way I never had before. As she recounts these private moments, Brooke raises unsettling questions about who Michael truly was beneath the layers of his iconic image. Her words hint at a complex, deeply vulnerable individual who, despite his worldwide fame, felt isolated and misunderstood. Brooke suggests that at times, he was almost a stranger even to himself, torn between the demands of his career and a desire for a simpler, more authentic life. And perhaps this explains why she stayed silent for so long, choosing to shield this secret side of Michael, the side he had only allowed her to see. But why speak out now after all these years? Why break her silence on a matter that has remained a mystery for so long? Brooke's decision has left many speculating about the motive behind this revelation. Could it be out of loyalty to her friend, a desire to correct misunderstandings and share the truth? Or was she finally ready to unburden herself of a story that had weighed on her for years? Regardless, what she has to share now paints a far more complex and conflicted image of the Michael Jackson we thought we knew. So what did Brooke Shields truly know about Michael Jackson, and why is she only choosing to reveal it now 15 years later? Her revelations, hinting at an unseen side of the pop icon, may forever change the way the world remembers him, adding depth and darkness to a legacy that is still the subject of fascination, admiration, and mystery. Brooke and Michael's bond ran far deeper than most people realized. From the outside, it may have seemed like a simple friendship between two young stars navigating the spotlight, but for them, it was something much more profound. Both thrust into the public eye at young ages, they shared a unique understanding of the relentless pressure and scrutiny that defined their lives. In Brooke, Michael found a confidant who didn't see him as a global icon or a distant legend, but as a person with fears, insecurities, and hidden struggles. Unlike the crowds of admirers and acquaintances who surrounded him, Brooke offered him something rare, a space where he could be vulnerable, unfiltered, and real. Michael often spoke to Brooke about his struggles with self-image, a sensitive topic that many speculated about but few truly understood. To the world, he was the king of pop, a performer with near supernatural talent and an aura of invincibility. Yet in private moments, Brooke saw a different side. She recalls how Michael would sometimes look at himself in the mirror, deeply troubled by what he saw, as though he were searching for someone he could no longer recognize. It wasn't just his physical appearance, changed dramatically over the years, but his sense of identity that seemed to cause him turmoil. He often confided in Brooke that he felt trapped by the expectations of his fans and the public, a persona that had become a prison, making it nearly impossible for him to feel like himself. Brooke describes how Michael would sometimes retreat into himself, his expression distant and almost haunted. During their quiet moments together, he would share his longing for a life that wasn't defined by fame, a life where he could escape the constant demands and simply be. She remembers him saying that he felt as if he was performing not just on stage, but in every aspect of his life, constantly playing a role to satisfy everyone around him. His fame, which had brought him so much success and adoration, had also become an overwhelming burden. There were times, Brooke shared, when I could tell that he was struggling to find a part of himself he had lost, or maybe never even had the chance to know. These conversations were a window into Michael's inner world, a world of quiet conflicts and hidden battles that few people witnessed. Behind the scenes, he grappled with intense feelings of isolation, despite the endless crowds and adoration. For Brooke, it was heartbreaking to see him so conflicted, constantly trying to live up to the impossible standard of perfection the world demanded. She recalls moments when he would speak of his dreams and aspirations with a passion that seemed both inspiring and tragic, knowing that achieving them only added to the weight on his shoulders. To her, he seemed like someone chasing a fleeting sense of peace, something always just out of reach. Brooke's revelations paint a picture of a man at odds with his own success. Despite the image of strength he projected, he was deeply affected by the intense pressures that came with being Michael Jackson. His desire for a simpler, more genuine life clashed with the reality of his fame, creating an inner struggle that, as Brooke suggests, may have ultimately defined him more than his achievements. Through her eyes, we see a Michael who was not only a performer, but also a person wrestling with profound loneliness and a relentless quest for self-acceptance, a side of him that even the closest fans never knew. Brooke's revelations also shed light on the duality of Michael Jackson's personality, the contrast between his public and private selves. On stage, Michael was magnetic, exuding confidence and electrifying audiences with his boundless energy. He appeared untouchable, every move calculated, every performance flawless. But in his private life, according to Brooke, there was a far more sensitive and conflicted man hiding behind that powerful image. He had cultivated a larger-than-life persona that seemed to offer him a sense of control over how the world saw him. Yet in reality, it often left him feeling trapped within an identity that wasn't entirely his own. Brooke recalls times when Michael would let his guard down, revealing insecurities that the public never saw. He would talk about the pressure he felt to maintain an image of perfection and mystery, something that he had carefully constructed over the years. Brooke described how Michael would express concerns about how people perceived him, confessing that he felt misunderstood by almost everyone around him. He always wanted to be loved and accepted, but he was constantly haunted by the idea that people only saw him as this untouchable figure. Brooke shared, despite his success, he struggled to bridge the gap between the man he was and the legend he had become. This duality wasn't just an emotional conflict, it seemed to permeate every aspect of his life. Brooke recalls how Michael would sometimes speak in a childlike, gentle tone, almost as if he were trying to protect himself from the harshness of reality. Other times he would become intensely serious, expressing a sense of responsibility to live up to his public persona. This constant switching between vulnerability and strength created a tension that seemed to weigh heavily on him, as though he were constantly torn between who he was and who he was expected to be. For Brooke, it was heartbreaking to watch someone so talented feel imprisoned by his own image, unable to truly connect with others in the way he desperately wanted. Michael's need for approval went beyond his audience. He was constantly seeking validation from those closest to him. Brooke remembers conversations where he would express doubts about his own worth, questioning whether people loved him for who he really was or simply for what he represented. This need for acceptance was a driving force behind much of his behavior, influencing how he interacted with friends, family, and even his fans. Yet the closer he got to people, the more fearful he seemed of revealing his true self, as though he believed that the real Michael Jackson wasn't enough. Brooke's insight into Michael's conflicted personality reveals a man caught between worlds, one where he was revered and adored, and another where he felt profoundly alone. His fame, while bringing him admiration, had also created a barrier between him and genuine human connection. For all the love he received on stage, Brooke suggests that he often felt isolated, uncertain if anyone truly understood him. Her stories paint a poignant picture of a man who, despite his incredible success, was still searching for something he could never quite find: acceptance, not just from others, but from himself. For years, Brooke kept these intimate insights about Michael to herself, bound by a sense of loyalty to her friend and a desire to respect his privacy. She remained publicly supportive, always speaking positively about him and the bond they shared, even when others around him were quick to expose or criticize him. But her recent decision to reveal these personal truths raises questions. Why now, after so many years of silence? Brooke's choice to open up has led many to speculate about her reasons, and it seems there's a deeper story behind her timing. Brooke suggests that she felt a responsibility to set the record straight, especially in light of how public perceptions of Michael have shifted over the years. She acknowledges that much of the world only knew the king of pop persona, the dazzling performer, the superstar, but to her, Michael was far more complex, a person who was burdened by fame and isolated by his own struggles. Brooke has said that she wants people to understand Michael's humanity, his vulnerabilities, and the internal battles he fought away from the spotlight. Some suggest that Brooke's revelations come from a need to finally release the weight of these memories, stories she had carried alone for years. Watching the media continue to speculate on Michael's life and legacy, she may have felt compelled to offer a more personal perspective, one that might change how people see him. There were sides to him that the world never saw, and Brooke's decision to speak out is, in many ways, an attempt to protect the memory of the person she knew, a deeply sensitive man who was more than just his public image. But there's also a sense that Brooke may have struggled with her own feelings about their friendship and her silence. Perhaps she felt conflicted, wondering if keeping his secrets was the right choice, or if sharing his struggles might offer a more compassionate view of him. Brooke's revelations hint at the emotional toll her silence may have taken on her, and speaking out could be her way of finding closure and honoring her friend in a way she hadn't before. By breaking her silence, Brooke has opened a door into Michael's private world, one that had remained locked for years. Her decision to share these personal insights now, so many years later, feels like an attempt to bring clarity to a legacy clouded by both admiration and controversy. It's as if she's saying to the world, there's more to Michael than you'll ever know, and it's time to see the man behind the music, the friend she knew, and the person few others truly understood. The truth Brooke has recently shared about Michael's inner struggle sheds light on a darker side of his journey, a side shaped by intense pressures and profound insecurities. Her revelation suggests that while Michael was celebrated as a larger-than-life icon, he was simultaneously grappling with personal demons that weighed heavily on his sense of self. Brooke describes moments in which Michael confided in her about his overwhelming fears, his battle with isolation, and his growing discomfort with the image he had crafted for the world. Brooke's account reveals a Michael Jackson who felt a relentless need to alter his appearance, a fixation that spoke to something deeper than cosmetic changes. According to her, he was often searching for validation not only from the public but from himself, seemingly haunted by the belief that he wasn't enough as he was. Brooke recalls the anguish Michael expressed over his changing image, hinting at an ongoing struggle with self-acceptance. She remembers him saying he felt like he had to be someone else to be loved, even if that meant losing himself in the process. Brooke has suggested that the pressures of fame fueled this inner conflict, making Michael feel trapped between the person he truly was and the image he projected. His self-doubt extended into almost every facet of his life, affecting not only his appearance, but his relationships and choices. Brooke describes how he would confide in her about feeling like a stranger in his own skin, as if the world's expectations had created a version of himself he could no longer recognize. There was a sadness about him, Brooke shared, a sense that he was always looking for something he couldn't quite find, some peace or comfort that kept slipping away. Her insight into his struggles with fame, identity, and isolation highlights the sacrifices Michael made to sustain his career and the toll those sacrifices took on him. It wasn't just physical exhaustion that wore him down, it was the emotional toll of trying to meet the demands of a world that idolized him while rarely understanding the person behind the fame. Brooke describes moments of profound sadness, times when Michael seemed almost defeated by his own life, as though the pressures and expectations had chipped away at his happiness and left him feeling alone in a world that constantly scrutinized him. Brooke's revelations offer a rare glimpse into the private pain Michael carried, a pain he kept hidden from the public but shared in moments of vulnerability with her. His life, while dazzling on the outside, was far more complicated behind closed doors. The sacrifices he made, the identity he struggled to maintain, and the battles he fought with himself reveal a side of Michael Jackson that few ever knew. And through Brooke's eyes, we see a man who was both deeply talented and deeply troubled, a man who gave everything to the world but ultimately felt that he had lost a part of himself in the process. Brooke's recent revelations also highlight the immense pressure Michael faced as he worked to uphold his image while grappling with inner turmoil. She describes him as a person torn between his desire for approval and a growing sense of dissatisfaction with the life he led. According to Brooke, Michael confided in her about how the constant spotlight wore on him, his need to constantly meet the expectations of fans, and his exhaustion from maintaining a persona that didn't always align with who he truly was. His life, she suggests, was a delicate balancing act between his public persona and his private struggles, with each side pulling him in opposing directions. Brooke recalls that Michael's concerns extended beyond his own image. He often expressed worry about how his family perceived him, especially his strained relationships with certain family members. This internal struggle with identity was complicated by his family's expectations and the legacy he felt pressured to uphold, even if it meant sacrificing his own well-being. Brooke describes how he sometimes seemed isolated, even in the presence of others, as though he were mentally escaping to cope with the relentless expectations surrounding him. These pressures, Brooke reveals, fueled Michael's need for perfection in every aspect of his life. He obsessed over details, from his music to his appearance, driven by an underlying fear of not measuring up. This drive to be flawless created a profound internal conflict, leaving him feeling more alone with each passing year. In her conversations with him, Brooke sensed that he was haunted by a persistent fear of failure and abandonment, feelings he rarely shared with anyone else. His life, marked by extraordinary achievements, was paradoxically filled with insecurities that prevented him from finding the happiness he so desperately sought. In these moments, Brooke could see that Michael was battling more than just the pressures of his career. He was confronting an internal conflict that left him searching for validation and peace. She describes how he would sometimes express a desire to escape, to find a place where he could be himself without fear of judgment. But in the next breath, he would speak of his duty to his fans, the weight of his legacy, and his fear that stepping away would mean letting others down. It was as if he were torn between escaping the burdens of fame and being forever trapped by his need to maintain it. Brooke's account suggests that Michael's struggle went beyond his public persona. It was a fundamental conflict within himself. He wanted to be free of the expectations that came with his fame, but he was unable to separate himself from the legacy he had created. Brooke's story paints a picture of a man who felt obligated to be everything to everyone, yet never truly knew if anyone understood who he really was. Through her eyes, we see Michael Jackson as someone who was, in many ways, a prisoner of his own success, a man who gave his all to the world, yet remained forever haunted by his inner battles. One of the most poignant parts of Brooke's revelations is her account of her last private conversation with Michael, a conversation that now, looking back, feels laden with signs of his inner turmoil. Brooke recalls that during this final encounter, Michael seemed distant, his thoughts preoccupied, almost as though he were struggling with something unspoken. There was a heaviness to his words, a weight that she hadn't noticed before. At the time, she thought it was just exhaustion from the demands of his career, but in retrospect, she wonders if it was something much darker. In this conversation, Michael confided in her about his overwhelming sense of loneliness, his fear of being misunderstood, and his struggle to keep going in a life that felt increasingly out of his control. He spoke of feeling isolated, even in rooms full of people, and how the pressures of his fame seemed to intensify with each passing year. Brooke sensed an almost desperate desire for escape in his words, a need to break free from the unrelenting expectations that defined his every move. She describes how he would pause, lost in thought, as if searching for the right words to express something deeply personal yet hidden. Michael hinted at the toll these pressures were taking on his well-being, telling Brooke that sometimes he wished he could just disappear and live a simpler life, free from the demands and scrutiny. His voice carried an edge of sadness, a vulnerability he rarely showed to others. For Brooke, hearing him say this was both shocking and deeply heartbreaking. She could see that the man she once knew, vibrant, full of dreams, had been worn down by years of relentless fame and personal conflict. It was as though he felt trapped in a life that he no longer recognized as his own. This conversation, Brooke says, left her feeling uneasy. She could sense his fatigue, his longing for peace, and his desire for something more fulfilling than the adoration of fans. She recalls leaving with a feeling that Michael was struggling with issues he couldn't fully share, a darkness that had taken root over years of internal conflict. In hindsight, Brooke realizes that this final conversation held hints of a farewell, subtle indicators that Michael might have been reaching out, hoping someone could understand the depth of his pain. Reflecting on that day, Brooke admits that she wonders if there was more she could have done, a way she might have supported surrounded him that could have made a difference. But Michael was guarded, and despite their closeness, there were parts of himself that he kept hidden, even from her. Now, her memories of that last conversation carry a haunting quality, a reminder of a friend who, despite the world's love, felt alone in ways no one fully realized. As Brooke reflects on her friendship with Michael, she realizes that the memories and revelations she holds provide a new perspective on his legacy, a legacy that is both inspiring and tragic. Through her eyes, we see a man who gave everything to his art, who broke barriers in music and dance, and who redefined pop culture on a global scale. But alongside the achievements and the adoration, Brooke's insights reveal a Michael Jackson who wrestled with private battles, insecurities, and an unrelenting pursuit of perfection that left him vulnerable and, at times, isolated. Brooke's stories offer a reminder that Michael was more than the dazzling icon seen on stage. He was a deeply sensitive, complex individual, one who felt the weight of his fame as much as he thrived on it. Her revelations invite the world to consider the humanity behind the legend, a man who sought love and acceptance, who grappled with identity, and who ultimately paid a high price for the fame he had once dreamed of. For Brooke, it's clear that Michael was searching for something throughout his life, a sense of belonging, an escape from the roles he felt forced to play. And while he achieved unprecedented success, that personal peace he longed for may have eluded him. This newfound glimpse into Michael's life doesn't change his extraordinary contributions to music and culture. If anything, it deepens his legacy, adding layers to the public figure we thought we knew. Brooke's reflections allow us to see the dualities he embodied, a man celebrated and scrutinized, adored yet profoundly alone, idolized yet often misunderstood. Her words serve as a reminder that despite his fame, Michael Jackson was also a person with vulnerabilities, struggles, and unfulfilled desires. So what do these rare moments say about Michael's true legacy? Perhaps we'll never fully understand the depth of his experiences, nor the complexities that defined his life. But one thing is certain, through Brooke Shields' eyes, we've been given a rare and intimate glimpse into the soul of a legend, a man who, despite his struggles, left an indelible mark on the world, forever changing how we see both artistry and fame. In the end, his legacy is more than his music or his performances. It's a story of triumph, tragedy, and the complexities that come with being a global icon in a world that both adored and judged him.